meditation of my heart be always acceptable to you, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Speaking of hubris, there was a day that I was walking along to Wells Fargo, you know, the bank. I like to park where it's shaded, and sometimes that means I have to walk a little ways, but it was worth it. So it's 2005, and I'm walking in, and I notice that in front of me, and in front of the door, right before the doors that lead into the bank, there is a deep purple Lamborghini. If you're not familiar with a Lamborghini, it was the supercar of all supercars. It began the whole revolution of not just sports cars, but supercars. And as a side note, Mr. Lamborghini actually used to build heavy machinery for farming. And a friend of his, whose last name is Ferrari, asked him to take a Ferrari. Do you know the story? He asked him to take a Ferrari out for a drive. And so Lamborghini took the Ferrari out and took the keys back. And in a very Italian way, tossed the keys to Mr. Ferrari and said, "You don't know how to make cars. Your car can't corner. It keeps sliding out in the back." And Mr. Ferrari said, "Yeah, I'd like to see you build one better." Well, he then created the Lamborghini. So here's one, and I've only seen a handful of these in my life. They are some of the most expensive cars, at least mass-produced, relatively mass-produced cars in the world, and there it is. It's a deep purple color, except when the sun shines right where it's shining on it, the glare is a pearl pink color, and the rest is deep purple. It's unbelievable paint job. And it has a thing called gull wing doors. And so instead of the doors opening out, they open up. And so the doors were pointing up to the heavens. There's the car that looks like a spacecraft. It looks like it's going 60 while it's standing still. And there it was, and I'm walking up, and other kids like me were like, "Wow, look at this car," and I'm walking up, and they're all kind of looking around. Apparently, the other Lamborghini I saw parked, it too had its doors open. It's like, come and see, there's nothing to steal inside, there is no room for any luggage, there's no room for golf clubs, no surfboards in this car. It's just a super 12-cylinder engine with a steering wheel, that's all it is. And so the doors were up. And I'm looking at it, and then in comes a car. You know the sound a car makes when it's going too fast in the parking lot? You know, it kind of gets your attention. So I look over, and it's a bright, brand new silver Porsche Boxster. So nice convertible, and it's so new, the tires have that nub stuff on the outside that sticks out. Yeah, brand new, didn't have its California plates on it, nothing. And the driver was driving up, and you can tell when a male driver is proud of his car. You can tell the way he clicks it, right, to lock it. The beep, beep, it's like somebody's ringing a bell in church. Beep, beep, right? And he got out, he closed the door, he admired it, beep, beep. And he starts walking into Wells Fargo, his Nautica jacket with the collar turned up. He's having a good day, and he notices a crowd, and he looks over, and there's the Lamborghini. You could buy 4 Porsche Boxsters for the price of that one Lamborghini. And he looked crestfallen. His shoulders fell. His smile evaporated from his face. And he just walked. It should have been the best day. He's probably going to pay for it. It should have been the best day of his life. I just bought a Porsche Boxster, a Lamborghini, right? That's how life seems to work. And I don't want to judge this guy too much. I mean, I already did by telling you he had a Nautica jacket with the collar up. But I don't want to judge him too much. I'm just wondering, where are his roots planted, as they would say in Psalm 1? Where is he getting water from? If he's getting water from driving a brand new Porsche Boxster, so that was 2005, that's what, 14 years ago? It doesn't look as good as it did then. I mean, it wears out. I don't think that Lamborghini, I bet it looks just as good now, but that's because you only drive it once or twice a year. So it makes me wonder, right? And that's what got me thinking about Psalm 1 today. Psalm 1 is the psalm that we had for our lessons. The Psalms are a very important book for the faithful. Our tradition, our liturgical, our service, comes from ancient sources with the early church, which used to be called the Way. And those sources are from ancient Judaic services, where the Psalms are very important. So the first lesson, that rotates. Obviously, the gospel rotates, the epistle, but the psalm is always the Psalms. There's only 149 of them, and we go through them year by year by year. So this is the first time we have Psalm 1. Psalm 1 is called the preface psalm. In this short psalm is the story of all the rest of the 149 psalms that follow. If you can see the theology of what's happening in Psalm 1, every single psalm that follows will make sense. Back in those days, you would study and memorize the Psalms first. You would have those. Psalm 1, if you can imagine, it's on a scroll, and they have all the scrolls. 150 is the closest to where you spin, and Psalm 1 is the beginning. And so you would begin memorizing by beginning with this psalm. So if we can take a look at it, it's in your bulletin. It'd be interesting if I printed scrolls for you today, and we had to roll through them, but no, we have this. So, Psalm 1. The book of Psalms begins with the word happy. Yes, that's a great way to start. Happy are they. The best way to, I think, translate this in English would be, oh, the blessed. Oh, the blessed. Oh, the blessed who do this, who meditate on God's law. Oh, the blessed who do these things. It's a stronger word than happy. So, oh, the blessed who have, they who have not walked in the counsel of the wicked, nor lingered in the way of sinners, nor sat in the seats of the scornful. So we begin with, oh, the blessed, oh, happy. And then we have a bunch of nots. Not walked, nor lingered, nor sat. This, many believe, is the path of destruction. This is how you begin down, how one would begin down the path of destruction. The first one is, you first walk in the counsel of the wicked. I'm just going to go for a little walk. Just see what life is like with these people. And then the second step down into destruction, I'm going to linger here for a little bit. I'm going to stop and I'm going to take a little longer look at what they're doing. And then finally, sat. This is the final, hi CJ. This is the final spot, sitting. Sitting is a position of power back then. If those folks then were to look at our tradition today of how the President of the United States addresses Congress once a year, if you notice that the Speaker of the House and the Vice President are seated and the President stands, they would find that strange because they would say the President needs to sit while everybody else stands. This is the seat of power. And so it's also along the path of destruction. That first for a while, you kind of walk along with those, and then you kind of linger with them for a while, and then you sit down, and then you're in. Happy is the one who does not walk, does not linger, and does not sit. The very beginning psalm, the preface of how to read all the rest of this, is a warning. Happy are they who do not do this. And it makes the reader wonder, am I walking amongst the council? Am I actually lingering? Or am I sitting? I have a friend who is addicted to gambling. He found himself sitting at his computer gambling. It had taken a seat of position of power over him. He was not happy. But happy are the ones who do that. Their delight is in the law of the Lord, and they meditate on his law day and night. By meditate, that means it would be simply like you today, taking out one of the lessons and sticking it in your pocket, and then once in a while during the day, just pull it out and read it. Or meditate on his law day and night is where you put it in your car somewhere, or you put it on your refrigerator. It's where you have the law, where you have God's word, just around, and you just pause and you reflect on it. It's not that you have to read it day in and day out. It's just that you have it with you. So blessed are those whose delight is in the law of the Lord. They are like trees planted by streams of water, bearing fruit in due season, with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. They are like trees planted by streams of water. This is not a random act. Trees don't randomly get planted. They're intentional. That you have been planted by the streams of living water. And if you remember from our Jeremiah reading last week, God said, I am the spring of living water. You have been intentionally planted by the spring. Now, in the ancient practices for agriculture, they would find a river, and then they would intentionally plant a stand of trees. And then they would route the river to run along the rows of where the trees have been planted. So in the heavy rain period when the river's running hard, they can close it down so just a small trickle that the tree needs runs down by the trees. And then in the season when it's hot and arid and the river is still flowing, they open up the doors all the way so the water continues season by season to go to the roots of the trees that are planted. Happy are they, planted by the streams of living water. The toil that it took for them to reroute the water is similar to the toil that it took Jesus to bring us the river of life, the river of peace, the river of grace that runs by our roots day in and day out. Yet, unlike a tree that is planted, we have a choice to take our roots and to go elsewhere. That's why the psalmist says it is not so with the wicked. And if you want to go literal translation, this is how it would read in English. Not so the ungodly, not so. It repeats. Not so with the ungodly, not so. They are like chaff which the wind blows away. The wicked shall not stand upright when judgment comes, the sinner in the counsel of righteous, but for the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed. My favorite translation, if you go direct, is for the Lord is knowing the way of the righteous. The Lord is knowing the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed. The way. Our early Christian church was called the way. Well, there are two ways. The second way, that is the way that is being talked about in this. The way of the wicked is of violence and of profanity. The way of the wicked is with greed. It's with procrastination, with persecution, self-deception. That way is doomed. That way will come to an end. That way, one day, will end. Happy are they. Psalms like to repeat. So you end the psalm and you begin the psalm again. But the way of the wicked is doomed. Happy are they who have not walked in the counsel, who have not lingered in the way of sinners, nor sat in the seats of the scornful. The way of wickedness, the way of destruction and doom, has its time counted. The Lord is knowing. The Lord knows. This sounds all good and nice, but if you look at our world, and specifically at folks in our country, the ones that you might consider to be wicked, they seem like they're doing just fine, right? They seem like they're doing well. They drive nice cars, they live in good homes, they eat good food. They seem like they're doing just fine. So was this psalm written for them, and does it really have any applicability to us today? Well, I want you to consider a couple people. Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin, who was the leader of the Soviet Union, was the way of the wicked. When he walked into a room, when he walked into a performance hall, when he would walk into whatever council he was in, they were instructed to stand and to applaud, and once he raises his hand, you then can stop applauding. There was a well-known ballerina that she wasn't fast enough when he walked in to start applauding, and she never danced again. There were people who were tired and couldn't stand and applaud as long as he wanted them to, and by fatigue, they would sit down, and they too disappeared. The way of the wicked. He killed more Christians than all the other deaths of Christians combined. He had a direct war against the church. when he died, his teeth were rotting out. He had fear and anger. He did not trust anybody around him. He fired his doctor, who said, by the way, when I say fired, it's worse than being fired. He removed his doctor, who said, you're working pretty hard, maybe you should slow down. That's all he said. And he no longer was his doctor or practicing. He was in his room after he transferred most of the power away from him. He drank vodka to kill the pain. He didn't trust dentists, and so his teeth were rotting away inside. And you know that type of pain. And so he would drink to end that. And they found him in his room, covered in his own feces in a really ugly way. They brought him to a hospital. They revived him. His daughter went to his side. His eyes opened for the last time. And she said he had a look of fear and of anger that she has never seen in her father's angry eyes. He raised his hand, he pointed up, and he died. The way of the wicked is doomed. By all accounts, he was very powerful, he was very wealthy. We don't know what's in his heart, but we know how he died. Pol Pot, Cambodia. He most likely killed himself. It was the day before extradition to the United States. Some of you know the story. He took a combination of pills. One of them was Valium. And as you know, that keeps you awake, keeps your heart rate up. He was well aware as his body was shutting down and as he was choking on his own stuff, he knew well in advance that he was suffocating himself by his own medicine. The way of the wicked is doomed. You know how Saddam Hussein ended? You know that the knot for the noose was tied incorrectly, and I don't need to tell you what happened? Osama bin Laden was killed by a SEAL 6 team member as Osama went for his own weapon. This is not a happy way to die. So when the psalm says, the way of the wicked is doomed, they are like the chaff which the wind blows away. At chapel services at Bradenton Christian School and the elementary school this past week, they talked about Fred Rogers. You know Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood? Do you know how he died? With his friends and his family and millions of adoring fans like me writing to him and thanking him for what he did in his life to make a difference. Members of Congress, President of the United States, members of the Supreme Court were writing to Fred Rogers, to the good pastor, to thank him for the work that he had done. His roots are planted by the stream of living water. His fruit comes forth in due season. His leaves never wither. Blessed is he who meditates on God's law. I don't often preach in black and white. Today, Moses said, today's the day you choose. Do you choose the way of loving the Lord your God, following his statutes? Or do you follow in the other way? Today's the day you choose. There's not half pregnant in this, folks. Happy are the way. So I'm going to leave you with one story. And again, I don't know this person's heart. Only God knows. God knows and is knowing the righteousness of all. There was a man who, when he was 70, had a very successful insurance agency. And he had decided for some reason, and I don't know why, at that point in his life, to break it up and to sell it off in its pieces, which caused more than half of his staff, many that considered him to be a father figure, to be laid off. I don't understand why. It made him $1.2 million more, I understand that. He was well off. Same year, he divorced his wife of 40 years. They have 2 beautiful children. They went to very good schools. Both children are successful in their own fields. They have healthy and beautiful grandchildren. But with the divorce of his wife and for running off with someone that he had met, who was significantly younger than him, that caused friction in the family over the course of 4 years, so that by the end of that period, his kids were no longer talking to him, and he no longer received pictures and stories about his grandkids. A year later, he contracted cancer that eventually would take his life. A young priest was called in by his side to offer last rites. It was the priest, paid to be there. The nurse paid to be there. There were no cards. There were no flowers. No one came to his side. Only two hired hands. Be on guard. If it can happen to him when he's 70. Now again, I don't know what's going on in his heart. I only know the facts of what was relayed. I don't know why he did this, but I think at some point he started to walk with bad counsel. At a certain point, he decided to linger with the sinners. At a certain point, he sat. And his life was blown away like the chaff. Blessed are those who meditate on God's law. Blessed are those. They are like trees with roots by the living water. They bear fruit in due season. Their leaves never wither. Happy are they. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.